Hello and welcome to another episode of Tory Talks. I'm Sam, and today this isn't Ian. This is Mick Fraser. He is a Suffolk County councillor and Favour councillor, and has served in the armed forces for 24 years. So our subject today is about national service. So I thought Mick is the perfect man to have that discussion with me. So thank you for coming on the podcast today. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Sam, and thank you for inviting me onto the podcast. It's my first one, so this should be interesting for me, I'm sure, hopefully for everyone else that's watching in. So, I'm sure we'll enjoy it.
Yeah, well, I'll try and treat you nicely, as it's your first one. So,
It was my first time.
Yeah, I'll be joking with you. Obviously we are both Tories, and so we've been sort of talking anyway. We're both in Suffolk, but we have another connection, and that is our connection with the armed forces. I only served 2 teeny tiny years in the Territorial Army, so that's my oath of allegiance there. But that short stint sort of gave me a little view into the world of the forces. And I also spent a couple of years in the Sea Cadets, volunteering there as a training officer. So from the point of view of children being part of, or young adults I should say, being part of something that's like military linked. And so I feel personally quite passionate about the idea of a national service as such for our young, and I just wanted to sort of thresh it out with someone and see what your thoughts might have been on that.
Interesting. You say the territorials. I was in fact, I did a year in the territorials before I joined up, and that was really a progression. I think I've been in uniform since I was about 8. Cub Scouts and a brief stint in the Scouts, a bit of a sabbatical for playing football, and then I was in the Army Cadets. Probably back in 1982, I remember it was just after the Falklands, and so I was 14, 15, and then progressed onto the territorials, which were in the same unit, before actually realising, my career, my employment path wasn't going where I wanted. So, I joined up at 19, so I had a bit of a background there in the reserves as well. So, I've got an affinity there.
So what do you think about the idea of possibly bringing back a national service as such for our young today?
It's a wide-ranging topic. It's not something you can simply say that this would be a great idea. Let's instigate it. And I think it's a great topic to debate because there's so many fors and against, or pros and cons. But I think where you were just discussing there about your time with the Sea Cadets, and that's an excellent point there. And I think this is really where, as the big society, perhaps, we should look at. I certainly believe that all our young people should be in some form of organised group, whether it be Scouts or a sports team or a choir, something where they have to work together. And also this is where we have our adults with their experience giving their time and experience and commitment to our young people to development. So I think that's really a very good cornerstone of where we need to be, certainly as a society, and to develop our young people for the challenges they're going to face in adult life. And then we come to adult life, and it's you say, right, so national service. And I think a lot of our fathers, certainly my father, did national service, a short stint in Egypt. And this was a period of time after the war, 1945 through to 1963, where we had an empire to police. We had independence issues that had to be managed, and you needed a an organised force to do this. So there was actually a requirement there. So I think when you start discussing national service, you have to say, well, is there a requirement first? What's the need? And of course, and I think what many people say, look, it was really good for the people that were in it. They because it instilled discipline, it gave them purpose. You start, everyone has to get up in the morning at 6 o'clock and be prepared, have breakfast, be out in the parade square ready to go early in the morning. And you can see there is some positive points there, yes, of course. So overall, I think it's a very good point to debate. Do I believe personally that we should have some form of national service? Yes, perhaps. But what exactly do we want it for, and what do we want our people to do? So, I say it's a broad subject worth discussing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and you're right in terms of whether there's a need. I have always found it interesting that people, as the generations are moving on, less and less people are volunteering, for example. And I always wondered if that stemmed from the decline as such as people when they're teenagers being part of organisations such as the Guides, the Scouts, the Cadets, and that kind of thing. And I wondered whether if it was made compulsory that you had to be part of something as a teenager, such as the say a military organisation, that you had that thing inside you that gave you the discipline and the mindset in order to do something and participate a little bit alongside what the Territorial Army does. Well, it's not TA now, is it? It's Army Reserves, in terms of homegrown, getting out in your community. That it might start giving the teenagers a bit of a sense of purpose that then could lead on to doors being opened into different worlds that they may not necessarily be thinking about at this moment in time, because there seems to be this constant battle of, there's too many teenagers on the street, but the teenagers saying there isn't really anything that we can do that's got no point to us. And then you have organisations such as the Cadets, which they're not seen as cool, so you don't go through the door. But if it's compulsory and you're kind of forced to go through the door, you realise actually it is pretty cool. It's just not your interpretation of cool until you go in there. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, as if there was a sort of latter teens compulsory type thing that then led on to, once you're an adult, you had to do compulsory national service as well. It's sort of like the foundation and the next step. We might be able to then start plugging the gaps that are being caused with the voluntary sector anyway, and also give our young some form of purpose, because it's something I feel really passionate about, volunteering. But you notice as the years go on, the different generations, they have different mindsets. And my generation and younger, it's really, really difficult to get them to volunteer. And that's why we have a shortage of volunteers. Obviously, with what's going on at the moment, and the reason we're not in the same room is because currently we've got COVID-19 and the lockdown. We're seeing how important it is to volunteer. But I was thinking if we had something that was a youth thing to start off with, it could then push that idea even further. So that's where I'm coming from on this, is a youth organisation as such.
Yeah, that's a very good place to start. Here in Hadley, we've got numerous youth organisations, Sea Cadets, sports teams, quite a lot. And we've got one high school. It's a lovely community, Hadley, I'm sure you know. And there are plenty of things for young people to do, but it's just a small group of young people that don't wish to engage, and they're the ones that it's difficult to reach out to. We have a minor problem with some antisocial behaviour. There are some drug issues here in the town, like everywhere else, and it's really trying to encourage those that are slightly disenfranchised, a way to actually bring them into some sort of organisation. If I can just advertise one group, there's Porch Project, you might have heard, they work here and in Sudbury. and they've got a lot of backing from some quite prominent residents and from the PCC as well, and other larger organisations to actually engage with them and bring them off the streets and actually get them to work together on some core skills. I like your idea, so to make it compulsory. I think, and there's a challenge, isn't it? Should every young person be prescribed into some sort of organisation? I think there you're touching on, our freedoms of choice. Are we into that? And also, where's the best place to bring this in? And I suppose I remember recalling seeing a very good programme on the BBC about schools and their CCFs, the Combined Cadet Force, and there were some schools that had quite a lot of ex-military teachers in there, including headmaster, and that's what they did. And it was a case of the encouragement was there on one particular day of the week, maybe a Wednesday or a Thursday. Those that were in the sort of the scouts or the cadet part, they could wear that uniform on that day as opposed to their school uniform, just to make it sort of stand out slightly different. So I think that's quite good. So I suppose if you're going to aim at where would you have these located, you might suggest actually the schools are a good starting point, and then you're looking, okay, funding. Where's the there's going to be some sort of resource required for this. So identifying that and make it worthwhile, and that might not be a bad place to start, because of course now I'll touch on something I'm not too well read on, is the children's centres and how funding for those have been reduced, and there were those. So we would be looking at going back into that sort of side. So I would certainly support that idea of yours, to have something there. Make it compulsory. Certainly need to get some encouragement, but the thing is, to those disenfranchised, is trying to attract them in, saying, well, look, this group, they do something really special here. They can dress differently. They're a bit of a clique. It's trying to encourage those in. That's quite a difficult thing. Yeah. Your second point, and here's where we need to go, is making it compulsory, in adult life. So 18, whatever, is right. Now all young people, 18-year-olds need to do national service of some form. And there's some quite good models around the world that you could look at on what they would do. Armed forces, particular. There's some good areas of debate around that. Do we want a massive armed forces? Well, actually, we can't even recruit enough to get into our present army. But employment figures, were quite high a couple of months ago. They're going to be significantly changed in the next few months. And actually, what would you want them to do? And I think we could move the focus away from armed forces into there could certainly be a starting point, but then actually bring them into some form of other civilian type of support, such as something to do with the blue lights, ambulance or fire, something like that. So there's a wide range of services that young people could be engaged with, not necessarily the military. Yeah,
correct. Actually, that is a really valid point of it becoming too narrow. I think what people don't realise, and I think until you're involved with it, you see the full spectrum of what's available when you enter into, whether it's the cadets or the forces. It is not just about, let's go marching and let's fire a rifle. You can learn civil service. You can do medical stuff. And I interestingly learned how to swim when I was part of the Territorial Army, and so there's all these different things. But I think with education, there is a lack within the education system for learning skills, and we we don't seem to realise that there is your education, but there's also this big set of skills that you need through life that I think can be taught as a young adult through something like a national service. So you can learn how to, we spent a lot of our weekends, to be honest, fixing Land Rovers, but I learned the basics of how a car works and how to change a tyre and stuff.
Yeah.
Some hard to reach young adults, they wouldn't necessarily have been taught that in their household. And so it's all these other skills that you learn, and also that being part of that team. And these are people, let's be honest, when you're part of your group, they're not necessarily people that you would probably meet on the outside world as such and be like, well, he's going to be my mate. But for some reason, when you've all got that uniform on, you know that you have to rely on each other for whatever task you're set and all this. And you learn so many life skills through it that I just think it would be such a shame for not everyone to experience that. Now, I had really highs, I had really lows in there, but the thing I take away with me for the rest of my life is those 2 tiny years that I've had, all the confidence that it gave me. And I think, for young adults to not have had that experience, they're really missing out on something. And you touched on the fact that we're struggling to recruit in the forces. And I've spoken to a warrant officer about it recently, and he said we're struggling to appeal to the younger generations. What are we doing wrong? And I think, maybe once they're part of it, part of the national service, some of them might then naturally go through it. It shouldn't be the aim of, by the way, we're going to just force young adults to be part of this so that they could then join our forces. It's to create well-rounded individuals who have participated in a really young part of their life in the makeup of our country, and to feel proud about that. So that's kind of where we come. But there's the lifeboats, ambulance services there, the St John's ambulance. There's all these other things to tap into as well to make it a broader thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be the army, but I think there's a strong case for it. Interestingly, that in France, Macron is very keen on bringing in a national service for young people. And we do have, I don't know if you know this, but we have this National Citizen Service. Have you heard of this?
No, I don't think so. You'd have to expand on that.
Well, it's for 15 to 17-year-olds. So we've got that in this country already. So it's called National Citizen Service. They run a programme in Inspire, which is 2 streets down from me. So I live in Ipswich, and they have the National Citizen Service in Inspire. And that's kind of like touching on, it seems to be a go-between, like a happy medium between the cadets and other services that are available. So it's more of like a sports and adventure type thing. So there is something that we have that is called a National Citizen Service, but it's not quite the vision of like the military. Prince Harry, I know he's not flavour of the month at the moment, but he's spoken quite a lot about bringing back a national service in this country. But again, is there a need for it, which you highlighted a few, when I joined the TA, we were still very much hot in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And my desire to join the TA was because of 9/11. I was at high school then, and I thought I want to be part of this as a purpose to defend my country, because I was absolutely affected by what happened in 9/11. It's kind of dying down now, I guess, and that sort of drive of a responsive way of joining. So is there a need for it as well, or are we just pumping in a lot? Would we then be just spending a lot of money on a service that probably wouldn't be fit for purpose? It's a difficult.
Yeah, it's like I say, you'd have to model it for what we need now. So after the war, so set up to the early 1960s, we needed a large force. We sent a conscripted, basically a conscripted army to fight in Korea. And they had that all sort of fallback. So you don't want to base it on that model because that was, middle of last century. We need something now. And I say, if you look around at other nations, I think Scandinavia, the Scandinavian countries have a very good look at it. And I think the Danish model is only around 1 in 10 are actually finally recruited, but they'll do the basic training, as you remember. So they learn all those those initial skills that you require, and then they might go to an army unit, or they might be then go to an ambulance unit or something like that. But they're all part of it, and I think the Scandinavian models are quite interesting because you have to apply. Every young person has to apply, but then they'll only filter out the best that they want for the numbers they need. So there's a little bit of competition thrown in there to actually provide it. But what do we need now? Well, I think actually, the key point you came out with there, Sam, is actually our numbers are in the armed forces. We're not recruiting enough people. So there are arguments that the national service soldier, perhaps, and I'll speak with the army, perhaps isn't as effective as a regular soldier. But I know that many commanders would rather have a person in their ranks rather than an empty space in their ranks. You need to fill those gaps. And I think let's talk about the reserve force now, the territorials as they were. I joined the territorials in '84, so and the army was huge then. The regular army was 180,000, so more than twice the size it is now. And the territorials were very largely populated with a great many people who were ex-regulars anyway, and I learned so much off them. They were my mentors. I love meeting them in the street nowadays. When I go back home here, I took so much from them, and they developed me into the person, into the person I am. They gave me that big start in life. Some of it not quite well. They taught me, they introduced me to bitter, as opposed to lager and things like that. But it was all really, and it was really, really good fun. And it's, the week. Do you remember the weekends? You'd finish work on a Friday, get home, don your uniform, take your kit, and then you'd go off for a weekend in a woods somewhere, not get no hours sleep, come back Sunday night, and then Monday morning you're absolutely destroyed. But you could describe what your weekend was to everyone else, and it was just like, wow, from what you did. And actually, it's the territorials, our reserve force. I think options for change back in the early '90s just wiped out the TA, and it was a bit like wiping out the cottage hospitals and the branch lines. It's going to be very difficult to get back, and I think they struggle much more with recruiting than the regulars do. So I think actually, an element of national service conscription type process to fill those ranks with people that will actually do something is very worthwhile. But they're expensive. Armed forces are expensive things, but we have committed to 2% of our GDP on our forces, and perhaps personnel might be more effective than some of the material that we buy. So certainly making sure that we're fully manned, and then equally we've got a reserve force to call on when you need it, rather than them being there part of the standing army.
Yeah.
But what do we need? Well, you see, you have military at the moment. You've got military aid to the civil authorities. Mackay. We've got drivers here in Suffolk. Military drivers helping distribute PPE to healthcare workers that need it. You see in the winter months, with the rainfall that we had, the military out putting up flood defences and that sort of thing. Imagine if we had a fully manned reserve force that you could call on to do that sort of thing. So there is that. So I think having a look around at what we require and what we can model it on, I think you could certainly say, right, every young person, 18 years of age, right, you've got to apply, you've got to make that first step. And of course, you could say, well, actually, we don't need armed forces here, but we need actually reserve firemen. So we want actually X number to be, on-call fire service for a year or something, or 2 years or something. Like you say, lifeboats. I think even they struggle, don't they? In some areas because of their shout time. They've got to be employed close by so they can drop out and be somewhere. And it's and I think you could do that. I think one of the things I say to young people leaving school, unsure, not knowing what they want to do, I don't encourage anyone to join the armed forces. I wouldn't push them. I don't think it's the right thing to do. But if they have, and for one reason, you don't want to push someone into that. Equally, the armed forces, like anyone, they want people who want to be in there because they're actually more motivated. But if any young person's got an idea, unsure what they want to do, but they might fancy it, I'll encourage them to do so, because for every young person that does it, imagine you're on you're in one of the services for a couple of years, 2 years. You're going to be trained to do so much. You're going to learn so much. You're going to gain so many qualifications, rather than being on a production line where you're just producing that item or going through that process. After a couple of years, your CV is going to be so much wider with experience, qualifications, leadership, that sort of thing. So it really is, a good building block for the future career progression and challenges that you're going to have throughout your adult life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes what frustrates me is that I have people in my life who can't get a job, and so the fact that they can't get a job isn't the frustration. It's the fact that they don't fill that time with volunteering or doing something that is going to prevent there being a massive gap in their CV. So constantly doing something, there is always someone out there that needs some form of support. And the skills that you pick up, even if it is volunteering, you can put that on your CV. Everything that you do is something that you're learning for life and building the foundations of what you're going to become, especially when you're young. And I mean, when you were saying about going to work and then and then spending your weekends on, oh gosh, the memories I have, and they make me smile because it was hard work, and I was working in the city. So I would go down to London with my bag and everything else, and drop my kit off, and then do my day's work, and then lug that back on the train. And I was in Colchester, and I couldn't drive, so I then had to get off at Colchester, spend my weekend, really tough weekends, and then Monday I just felt like I'd, and they would say, TA weekend, was it, Sam? And I'd be like, yes, but the stories you could tell and what you learn, and who I worked for said that with every week that went by, it was like a better version of me was coming in, because I was becoming so confident in myself and my ability, and it just pulls it out of you, doesn't it? Because you do all this stuff that you just couldn't imagine being able to do. I mean, I've driven Land Rovers on RAF sites through the big hills and stuff like that, and you just think you would never be able to do stuff like that in your day-to-day job.
No, and that's it. And I think it's to develop oneself. The one with the military is they push you further than you'd naturally feel comfortable with. You take those extra steps with risk. Even this is a challenge. I think abseiling is really the one that's advertised a lot, isn't it? And I learned to abseil in the TA, and it is it's something you wouldn't. Who in their right mind would want to go and do that? But once you've done it, it's extremely good fun, isn't it? And it is, and that's it. It's a fun thing. It's something else. And I think the older generation that served went through conscription, national service, they got something to talk about. They did that that element. And they got shiny shoes, you know, to show for it. And
yeah, beds made, shiny shoes. You can always tell. But yeah, I just yeah, you're right. And they've always got the stories. But also another reason why I feel so passionate about that is because when I did do my 2 years, and ever since, I've always felt that there's never been the appreciation and the respect for the forces that we probably should have. So I remember doing the Freedom of Ilford parade. So going through Ilford.
Oh yeah.
And it was amazing in one sense because you could wear your uniform in pride and you were part of something. But the rules with regards to your kit and where we could meet and everything else, because we were potentially going to be met with some hostility, was really disheartening. Yeah. And I think if everyone was to play a part in realising how important our forces are, maybe the level of respect for our armed forces change as well. Because even with this corona virus situation, we stand outside and we clap for our carers and our NHS, and rightly so, we should absolutely do that. We didn't do that when our members of the armed forces came home from Iraq and Afghanistan. There's a massive push for people within the NHS to make more money now, learning that, you know, these people are probably worth more than what they're on. There was that push when it came to our 19-year-old soldiers going to the front line in Afghanistan. And so we see the military very, very different to how we see people like the NHS. And everyone has a really important role to play in society. But I think it's possibly because you see people in the NHS all the time. You go to the hospitals, you see the nurses, you see how hard they work.
Yeah.
We're comfortably aware of the forces, but we don't have to see the hard work they put into it. If you're part of it, you're going to appreciate it a little bit more. And so I think for a respect level as well, because we don't have the respect in this country I think that the forces deserve, having to be part of something and realise how hard it is probably would help us regain the respect this country probably should have for our armed forces as well.
Yeah, you're right. They would certainly promote national unity. So you'd have shared experience, a better understanding and appreciation what all the armed forces do. And the more people, you'd actually get a much higher turnover of personnel, wouldn't you? Because you'd limit it to perhaps, say, 2 years, as it was before. Yeah. So so many people going out being part of that, and then equally they could be part of that active reserve afterwards. So they'd certainly have, it would certainly tick those two boxes, certainly the national unity one and a much better understanding of the armed forces. And I suppose that's what it is. It's, it's not just shouting and marching up and down the square. There's so much more, and it's a very complex beast. One of the items you mentioned to begin with is really learning and how much you learn. And I'm quite a bit old, a few years on you, so you're more current with education than I am. And you touched on a nerve with me and said that you're suggesting that education today is still very much more academic and more passive, whereas I'm very STEM. I am, I'm kinesthetic. I struggled with things that I couldn't actually, put my hands on. Whereas in the military, like you say, your head's under a Land Rover bonnet. You're given dilemmas that you can't read in a book. You have to think about how can you solve this situation. And that all goes really to, as I've mentioned before, experience in actually problem solving and that sort of thing. And yes, like the Thursday evenings is absolutely wonderful, isn't it? The NHS, the care workers, they're now actually being highlighted. They are the frontline troops at the moment, and they're given this weekly applause. The army units coming back from Iraq, Afghanistan. They may have arranged a parade. They'd walk through town. Everyone would see them there again, and then on that one occasion, and then they'd disperse and go off to other things. So I think there is that sort of appreciation. But I think if things go quiet for the military, I think they'll sort of lose more touch. And I think keeping them very much part of the British society is very important. It's one of the key three things, isn't it, that makes Britain so special. The royal family, the armed forces, and our NHS. They're really key things, aren't they? Which are the envy of the world. Other countries try and emulate them as best as possible. So yeah, it is important, I think, that we keep them. And you know, my one concern are the numbers. You know, we aren't fully recruited. But there we are.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and the cost, everything costs.
Yeah, another key point, and I think really it's certainly from my experience, and actually I think probably even when I was younger, but it promotes a lot more of equality amongst us all, right? Because you immediately you're thrown in with other people from other areas, other walks of life. It was very much male dominated when I joined, because you had the Women's Royal Army Corps, sort of WRAC at the time, whereas now women can join just about all trades. In fact, I think it is all trades now, isn't it? So that's very much more inclusive. And suddenly, you know, although I am half Scottish, you know, I was working with Geordies and Irish and Scousers, blimey. And it's like, wow, you know, what's life like up north? You know, anything outside? Well, the M25 hadn't been fully built then, but what was outside London for me? And it's suddenly meeting, and it's and of course it brought it makes you appreciate other people so much more.
Yeah.
And likewise, you're volunteering. You're saying you young people volunteer, meet with young people, and it's got to be so equal. Let's bring everyone, regardless of their abilities, beliefs, backgrounds, into our youth organisations, of course.
Yeah, and absolutely, and that's something that the schools can't do, because let's be honest, as much as we don't want to admit it, I guess, with education, is you often have like-minded families and like-minded people who live in certain areas that they want to live in, all going to the same school. It is very rare, unless you live in a very urban area, that you're going to come across all walks of life at school. I find it really strange. I accept that we split people into age groups anyway, but I always found it quite peculiar, because then in the real world, outside of school, you don't just hang around with people your own age. But you are still very much in a bubble at school. Whereas when you're in something like the Territorial Army or the cadets, you are thrown in with a mixed bag of everyone. You know, I had all walks of life, all faiths as well. And so that's when it was the first time that I formed a friendship with someone of a different faith to me properly, because they had to pray at different times. We went down to Folkestone and spent some time with the Gurkhas. So then you started understanding the culture and the importance of the Gurkhas with our forces and actually our country. And so you experience all this different world within your own country. And it's the only time really, because even if you do extracurricular activities, it's very much dependent on your finances. So if you are of low income, you will go to the free things normally. If you've got high income, you will go to like David Lloyd or whatever the tennis things is. So even the things that you do after school, very much dependent on your family makeup, your finances, and your bubble that you're in. Something like this, which is a national thing, you're then thrown in with everyone. And I think that's when you will also be able to have an understanding of the greater world as such within your own country, especially with the United Kingdom, because we are so diverse. But even though we're so diverse, we still have problems with all living as one. We still have areas of segregation, that this could also challenge that as well.
Yeah, quite right. You talk about segregation. I've seen it in Northern Ireland. It's still there, very much so. Peace walls, which is a complete oxymoron, really. And say it's bringing groups of people together from all backgrounds, and it's got to be a good thing. So it ticks a lot of those positive boxes. How it will improve the individual plus the wider society. So it's got a lot going for it, and I think and that's clearly one of the points why it's always raised. But hey, Sam, why don't we have it? Why don't we have national service? Do you think?
Well, I do think as a country we are now at a stage where we're a little bit apologetic for our forces. We're certainly apologetic for our history, and so we don't want to, just from my interpretation, we don't want to be seen as this real military sort of force. Also, we're very careful as a society with combining youth and military, because as soon as you combine the idea of the two, then you then have the fear of military youth groups and the negatives in history that's caused. Because the idea that do you know what I mean? So I think people may think actually it's a good idea, but when you're talking about the young, and then you're talking about national service or something like that, people have a discomfort, and I don't know whether they have a discomfort because of other areas of the world that have had this and it's gone horribly wrong, and so people are very cautious of it. Also, there's a massive cost element of it. There's 1.5 million teenagers between 16 and 17 in the UK. That's a lot of money, and that's a lot of organisation spent on it. However, how much money is spent on the police, crime, county lines issues, all this other stuff, negative things of mental health and stuff around teenagers? It's a balancing act. We spend a lot of money on this particular group of people anyway, but we're probably not putting the money. We're very reactive, so we've got real problems with county lines, but we don't really. I'm not sure whether we're addressing it in the right way, and there's no empowerment with these teenagers. But I think it's a very complex issue, but people are very cautious when it comes to a military organisation, just generally. And so I think that's why we don't have it. National service, though, taking the youth out of it, national service, I have no idea why we don't have it. I couldn't understand. I've looked it up. I really don't know what the drive was to get rid of it, other than maybe we were at peace times, there wasn't a desire to have it anymore. I don't know. Like, do you know why they got rid of it in the first place?
Well, I think, as you say, you had the drawdown of the empire. So after the war, quite rightly, all countries under our flag wanted their own independence, and we went about it different ways in individual countries. But so the policing that large expanse of globe shrunk. So that's what it was. So that's the key element on that. And equally, you then along the lines, well, what about your own civil liberties? Or, why should a person have to give up 2 years of their youth to go and do something they might not necessarily want to do? And equally, putting them in harm's way. We talked about the recent conflicts, Iraq, Afghanistan. I've seen many a young soul get seriously hurt or worse from those. So you have that side as well, and they're an expensive beast. To actually for a serviceman costs quite a lot of money to employ, house, clothe, all of those sort of things. When you look at other examples around even in Europe, so Greece, I think, is 9 months, but they're literally paid a pittance. They're just they're almost abused really for just they're not a national statistic of being unemployed. They're in the armed forces, but they're doing nothing and they're getting nothing for it, and it's a waste of time and people really. Um, and actually, does it have to be? Would it have to be centred on the military? We talked about the other sort of services they could be involved in, but also I think was it David Cameron was talking about sort of like a citizen service or something along the lines of the old American Peace Corps or whatever, where you go off and do good deeds around the world or whatever, supporting I don't know, Red Cross, Médecins Sans Frontières, something like that. Equally with its challenges, its risks, its adventure, all of those good things.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what comes. It's a subject that pops up every now and again, isn't it? And people talk about it and thrash it out. It would just be interesting to see whether there would be a politician who would kind of be brave enough to say, actually, let's put this back on the table and see where we can go. I think if there's ever a time to do it, it will probably be. I don't think it's going to happen, mind, but I think it would be interesting if there was a time to do it, probably after this lockdown, because though the forces hasn't been given the media coverage that I think it should in this time, they are the ones that are delivering all the PPE and that kind of thing. They are the ones that react to the flooding and stuff like that. Don't think they get much coverage. There's definitely now a desire and a feel and understanding for the need to help each other out.
Yeah.
It could be if you had someone that was of our mindset, I guess, up in the gods in Westminster, it could be put back on the table. I just don't think it will, but it would be nice to think that could be a conversation that isn't in an aggressive, let's force everyone to do this, but actually there are a lot of positives which we've briefly explored, and it would be great if we could talk about it all day, but we obviously can't. But there are positives to it, and it just needs to be done in the right way, and we need the right finances for it. But it'll be interesting to see whether this ever comes up again, and if we could influence it slightly. I would definitely. I mean, if I was elected, I would definitely be pushing for something like this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think actually, I think we could make it a compulsory application process, and then each year there could be a quota of what is needed to fill the gaps that, whether they be in the military or the blue services or for other things, but and actually give those people a structure and a choice or whatever. And actually, it'll provide the awareness. Actually give a little bit of competitive spirit and a bit of kudos actually if you were selected. So I think so. And actually you say when we come out of this lockdown, there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done, and people will be needed. So why not? It could be an opportunity, could be an idea. So might have to pass it on to Johnny Mercer or something.
Yeah, I might tag him into this and say, look, just watch what our ideas are and see what you think. But yeah, it'll be an interesting one. It's actually been a real pleasure to sort of thrash it out and thoughts with you, and that's why I definitely wanted to talk to you about this particular subject, because I knew that we had some form of shared experience in it. And it's actually been really nice to sort of reminisce a little bit about it as well.
and absolutely, and isn't that one of those delightful things? Is we speak that same language that your civilian doesn't understand, and you can tune into someone speaking that, and then you share that over a beer, and you just nod. You have that knowing smile about it as well, don't you?
Yeah, it's a bit like when you're a Ford driver or something, and then you pass another Ford driver and you just give them the nod. It's a little bit like that. If you've got any military connection at all, you're like, yep. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, it's been an interesting one. So thank you. What have you got planned for the rest of the day?
Grass cutting. I think that's very much doing gardening, and tidying up. So usual great fun Saturday things. It's just another weekend. Actually, I'm enjoying the house and the garden rather than rushing around going out doing things. It's a little bit of enforcement on enjoying and appreciating what I've built up, worked, earned for over these years is actually quite nice. And I suppose the one thing I've taken away from this lockdown period is really just actually appreciating what I do have and what is around me. Yeah.
That's a really nice way to end, actually, because I'm getting to it. As frustrating as it is, I was sitting out in the garden with my kiddies, and I just said to them, we're actually very blessed right now because we have, we're shielding, so we do have, but we are safe. We're lucky to have a garden, and then it's the first time that I've actually looked and thought I've worked so hard to get all the stuff and the lifestyle as such that we've got. And you can just sit back, slow down a little bit, and then think, wow, we're very blessed right now. So it's definitely made me appreciate the little things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, enjoy the rest of your day.
And you.
And I hope anyone who's watched or listened on the on audio has enjoyed us speaking about something that isn't lockdown related.